They shall be my finest warriors, these men who give of themselves to me. Like clay, I shall mold them, and in the furnace of war I shall forge them. They shall be of iron will and steely sinew. In great armor I shall clad them, and with the mightiest weapons shall they be armed. They will be untouched by plague or disease. No sickness shall blight them. They shall have such tactics, strategies, and machines that no foe will best them in battle. They are my bulwark against the terror. They are the defenders of humanity. They are my Space Marines, and they shall know no fear.
Space Marines, the Emperor's Angels of Death, the ultimate super soldiers of the Imperium. But what are all those things? Who exactly is the Emperor? Why can Space Marines eat tree bark? Well, in this video today, I want to prep you for Space Marine 2 coming out in September by going over the lore of the Space Marines on a very high level. This video assumes you have limited to no knowledge of Warhammer 40,000, and as a 20+ year veteran of the game, I am happy to share with you the wild rabbit hole that is 40k lore. We'll be discussing the origins of the Space Marines, what a Primaris Space Marine is, and how Space Marines are broken up into chapters. There's a lot of interwoven lore here across literally hundreds of books from Games Workshop, chronicling a lot of events that I'll be glossing over to try and give you that broader scope of understanding. Trust me, this video could be 3 hours long and I'd still miss topics. So if you're a fellow veteran, excuse me for any subjects I didn't go in depth on for the sake of brevity and not overwhelming our new battle brothers. I'll be showing off gameplay footage from Space Marine 2 with the occasional lore pictures over the top to help make this a bit more visually appealing than just a bunch of roving pictures. Also, if you are a veteran, you probably won't find any new info here, and I don't want to waste your time, so please feel free to shut the video down unless you want a little refresher. You can navigate to any part of this video that interests you the most by using the chapters in both the timeline and the description, and you can also find a link to my other Warhammer 40k lore videos in the upper right corner in case you want to dive in on other topics. Well, let's get started here on my video explaining what is a Space Marine. To open this topic up, we have to go back in time. Everything in the current timeline of the 10th edition of Warhammer 40k doesn't take place in, well, 40k. The current narrative is now in M42, which is the 42nd millennium. The events of Space Marine 2 occur at the most current point in said timeline with the Fourth Tyrannic Wars, part of what is called the Era Indomitus. The Space Marine origin story jumps back all the way to around the 25th millennium. The once galaxy-spanning civilization of humanity has collapsed into a series of pocket empires, and Earth, renamed Terra, is cut off from the greater cosmos via what are called warp storms. To put this in really simple terms, the warp is the unreality, where all of the nascent emotions of every living thing ebb and flow through a roiling ocean of psychic energy. There are planets, ghosts, demons, every store manager from a hot topic, different dimensions, all sorts of hell goes on there. Now, a warp storm is essentially a break in real space between the immaterium and materium, where, in this case, Earth is completely cut off from communication, travel, everything. This starts the Age of Strife, also known as Old Night. From here, humanity has broken from a once grand society with Terra as the seat of power to now a series of warring states that all vie for power in a constant tug of war over the scraps of what is left. These states and the inhabitants are known as the techno-barbarian states. I know what you're thinking, and not that techno-barbarian. Around the 27th millennium, an individual rises up to take control of the chaos and guide humanity into a new age of prosperity. This being is known as the Emperor. Through a lot of the newer lore, it's assumed that the Emperor has always walked in the shadows, pushing humanity, in crucial moments, to the next level. The Renaissance, Industrial Revolution, splitting the atom, all that is attributed to this individual. I think at one point in Master of Mankind, it's even talked about him possibly being Jesus Christ. It's a real interesting dichotomy that a lot of the authors have started to unfold in the more recent lore. Again, we get lost for hours on this topic, but the Emperor is a super being known as a perpetual. He cannot be killed, well, conventionally at least. Many millennia ago, a group of shamans recognized the growing threat of chaos. Chaos being the cosmic force that resides within the warp that pulls at the strings of living things to their own end. The shamans performed mass suicide, not with Kool-Aid, but used their innate psychic abilities to pool their power together in the warp and combine themselves into the being that would later become the Emperor, guiding and acting as a Sherpa to humanity across the ages. Now back to the origin story here. The Emperor stepped into the proverbial light for the first time as the being he was, rather than cloaked in mystery or using an alias. This started the era known as the Unification Wars, where the Emperor unified all of the techno-barbarian states under one banner, a banner that would go on to become the Imperium. His foot soldiers, the Proto-Space Marines known as Thunder Warriors. These warriors were adult men that showed both loyalty to the Emperor and noteworthy martial skills. They were genetically enhanced by the Emperor, clad in proto-power armor, and given the precursors to most of the armaments that we see some 20 millennia later, that we're going to see in Space Marine 2. They were divided into 20 regiments, each regiment focusing on a specific set of tactics, such as close combat warfare, besieging, fortification construction, the list goes on. Each regiment was named a legion, and the leader of these legions were named Primaris. The individuals were no different than their Thunder Warrior peers outside of maybe martial aptitude, tactical acumen, or veterancy. That was it. This would eventually become different when we talk about Primaris again. But for 3 long millennia, the Unification Wars raged across Terra, and with each millennia, more and more of the planet fell under the banner of the Emperor. At the final battle of the Unification Wars, the last Thunder Warrior was killed, defiantly raising the Emperor's banner to claim a victory. Or so the propaganda goes. This would be a crucial time to realize that most of everything in the Warhammer 40k universe, at least from the Imperium's perspective, is riddled with propaganda, dogma, and otherwise strict adherence to a religious creed proclaiming that the Emperor is a god. There's a lot more to unpack there, but the reality of what happened was the Emperor realized that the Thunder Warriors couldn't be used outside of the means of unifying Terra, nay. You see, the process to make Thunder Warriors was not fully perfected, and in that, most of the Thunder Warriors would die from degeneration over time, the heavy toll of all the augmetics breaking down their nervous system and bodies. Also, the Thunder Warriors were bred for one purpose: conquest. Full-fledged war to completely retake Terra. They were not peacekeepers, let alone wardens of a populace, so when the Emperor planned to range out among the stars, he knew he could not leave the planet in the hands of his warlike first sons, for it would just evolve into war once more. Instead, he took the process of creating a Thunder Warrior, which required a heavy amount of augmentations to an individual coupled with a synthesis of the Emperor's own DNA, and created the Space Marines. The soldiers of the Adeptus Astartes, or Adeptus Astartes, however you want to pronounce it. There's no established lexicon of pronunciation, so say things how you want. And they would eventually take the moniker of the Emperor's Angels of Death. These Marines replaced the Thunder Warriors as they died in combat. The final ones were finished off in an act known as the Culling, where the first legion of Space Marines, later known as the Dark Angels, alongside the Emperor's personal bodyguard, the Custodes, wiped out the last of the Thunder Warriors. Just like their forebears, the Space Marines were divided into 20 legions, each one focusing on a specific set of tactics, and also led by a Primarch. This event is known as the First Founding. But it was different this time around. A Space Marine is an ascended adolescent boy, typically 10 to 16, not a full-fledged man. Aspirants go through a rigorous vetting process to ensure that only the most proficient and able-bodied individuals are ready to go through the surgery to become a full-fledged Marine. The surgery, it isn't fun. In fact, a good chunk of hopefuls end up dying because the process includes placing 19 genetically enhanced organs into a fledgling Marine's body. The most important of them is their sire's gene seed. If the Thunder Warriors were very loosely made in the image of the Emperor, then the Space Marines are each made in the image of their Primarch. The gene seed shares samples of the Primarch's DNA that then helps to enhance the Marine in the specific focus that the Primarch was bred for. Another important implant is the Black Carapace, a subcutaneous uplink that allows the Marine to interface and control their power armor. Basically, think of all those nodes that dot the bodies of people in the movie The Matrix, only way more intense. Other organs allow the Marine to process near anything as a form of food, hence that tree bark joke earlier. That's like straight out of a book. It says, I can eat tree bark. Another allows the Marine to put themselves into essentially a coma if they are on the brink of death. You have a secondary heart, expanded lung capacity, increased mental capacity such as eidetic memory or photographic memory. Some Marines can even spit acid depending on their mutations, which is also worth bringing up. The gene seeds are prone to mutation, allowing for all the different bits of flavor that spice up every single legion. The Space Wolves having long canine teeth and enhanced smell, the Blood Angels having the red thirst and eventual black rage. The list just goes on when it comes to these mutations. A mutation might be a harsh word, but still you get the point. This is in part because of the mutation from the seeds over time, but mainly due to the mutations wrought from their gene sires, the Primarchs. So the Primarch project was the first step in creating the Space Marines. By creating their leaders, the Emperor created 20 sons, each one embodying a specific facet of his grand acumen. This program was foiled by the machinations of chaos. For the veterans that are listening, you know I really mean Argoltal. The powers of chaos sucked the 20 sons into the warp and spat them out across the cosmos in the events that concluded the Unification Wars and started the Great Crusade. The Emperor set out to find all 20 of his sons, uniting them with the legions of Space Marines that were created in each of their images. This would eventually lead to the events of the Horus Heresy, dividing everyone across Loyalist and Traitor legions. It's worth noting here that unlike the Primarchs of the Thunder Warriors, the Primarchs of the Space Marines are definitely unique. They are not just simply, oh, it's a better, faster, or a stronger fighter. It's a overall superior being to a Space Marine. They're effectively immortal. They're larger, they're stronger, they're faster, they're smarter, they're everything. So the Primarchs are a step below the Emperor, but many steps above a Space Marine. And when you play the Eternal War mode, it is referencing the millennia-spanning war between both of these factions, the Loyalists and Traitor legions. The Traitor Marines call this the Long War. And stepping away from the script here, just to kind of give you a little ad-lib on Space Marines, it's important to know that Space Marines are held in extreme high regard by the entirety of the Imperium. The Imperium has many, many different arms to it. You've got the Imperial Guard, you've got the Sisters of Battle, you have the Inquisition, you have so many different arms. But the Space Marines are almost revered to a lot of the common citizenry, especially the Imperial Guard, as almost divine, as almost these warriors of legend. Some have myth attached to them, like, oh, all the Space Marines are gone. Or, no one's seen a Space Marine. Stuff like that. So when you watch the trailer for Space Marine 2, the very first announcement one, where you have Imperial Guardsmen fighting against Tyranids. Again, Imperial Guardsmen just kind of look like normal humans, right? When the Space Marines come, they take to a knee and they say, oh, his angels. And that's a reference to the amount of reverence that just the general Imperium citizenry has for these guys. And it's just a real important kind of thing to take note of, because it's not just simply saying, hey, these are super soldiers, and when they show up, everyone cheers. Yeah, maybe they show up and everyone cheers, but there's always like a very palpable, these things are removed from our mortality. Even the Space Marines refer to, depending on which chapter and legion and so on and so forth you're talking about, the Space Marines refer to humans or any kind of non-Space Marine as just simply immortal. So there is definitely a removal of these two fighting classes or castes, whatever you want to call it. But it's just an important note that I don't think the Space Marine Codex really drives home as much, and the Imperial Guard Codex doesn't really drive home as much. It's something that you read when you start to read the Black Library books, which is the name of the publications that Games Workshop uses to make all these lore videos, these fluff lore and fluff books, not videos. So you get a sense for really how important these guys are, really how badass they are, and how strong they are. And if you've played tabletop, you know how quickly that they die in tabletop, and it really just kind of throws everything for a loop when you've read so much lore of how awesome they are. But let's get into some conversations about the Primaris. So now that you know what a Space Marine is, what exactly is a Primaris Space Marine? Because even though the game is called Space Marine, you're actually playing as a Primaris Marine. Primaris are an even further enhancement upon the original Space Marine across the board, even considered to be incorruptible. The last fact is supremely important, as the events of the Horus Heresy is one of the biggest driving forces for the cosmic conflict in the setting. To distinguish between the two, the OG Space Marines are dubbed the Firstborn. To be honest, if you're new to the hobby, this was just Games Workshop's way of keeping the older models of Space Marine relevant while they phased in all the newer Primaris models. What they lack in individual character, they make up for in proper body proportions and model detail. But that goes into a whole nest of side conversations that's irrelevant to the video. Moving on, the Primaris were created by Roboute Guilliman and Belisarius Cawl. Remember how we talked about the 20 Primarchs? Well, only 18 were discovered. Big air quotes on that one, and half of them became traitors. The Loyalist Legion of the Ultramarines was, and is, now, again, led by Primarch Roboute Guilliman. Ultramarines are who we play in Space Marine 2. Roboute Guilliman, or as I call him on the channel, Bobby G, instructed Belisarius Cawl to create the Primaris back in the 31st millennium as a means of both reinforcing the depleted forces of the Imperium, but also as a way to fix all the flaws in the original Space Marines. If the Space Marines could be corrupted, they could not be wholly relied upon as humanity's domain increased. The Primaris Marines were the answer. As I mentioned, they were stronger, faster, better reflexes, taller, just an all-around better Space Marine. Cawl used the gene seeds from the Primarchs prior to the Horus Heresy, so before any kind of degeneration could occur on the gene seed over the years. This was important as a lot of the gene seeds over time had started to mutate further down a path of instability, namely the Blood Angels as their issues with the Red Thirst and Black Rage. Getting some more extra organs, because I mean, why not? If you're inside, let's just jam a few more in there, and having an overall stronger gene seed capable of resisting both chaos and degenerating over time, the Primaris are the Imperium's ultimate answer to the rising tide of conflict in the 42nd millennium. Current Firstborn Marines can go through a process to become Primaris, and most of all the leadership elements of the Space Marines have done so. This act is known as crossing the Rubicon Primaris. Our main character in Space Marine 2 has already done this. The surgery is extremely dangerous and very taxing, even for a Space Marine, which is saying a lot. The result is ascending to a Primaris. Now, despite how dangerous this is, not a single named character has died in the Warhammer universe from it, just some nameless individuals that are written off in the narrative to create tension, so there's that. Either way, in Space Marine 2, you're playing the biggest and the best in the Primaris. To close our video out, we're going to talk about the Space Marine chapters, because we discussed how they were broken into legions. Well, that changed after the Horus Heresy. Deeming it too dangerous for any one leader to have control of so many Marines at once, Roboute Guilliman drafted the Codex Astartes, breaking the legions up into chapters. This is known as the Second Founding. It's worth noting that some legions actually used chapters as a form of organization prior to this, like how multiple squads make up a platoon and platoons make up a company. You get the picture. Chapters are comprised of roughly 1,000 Space Marines, with the chapter further broken into 10 companies, 100 each. The first company is typically the most veteran company, while the 10th is the scout company. Each company, under standard codex rules, has a specific focus, but that is often thrown out depending on what chapter you're looking at. I'm going to break down each one of the main first and second founding chapters in my next video, but I wanted to help give you an idea of how these chapters factor into the grand scheme of things, as we'll be playing as Demetrian Titus, a Primaris lieutenant in the second company of the Ultramarines chapter, no longer Legion. A lot of the original first founding legions remained the same name, only as a chapter, and their extra forces were broken into successor chapters of the parent legion. So for example here, if we're taking a look at the Blood Angels, which was an initial first founding legion, one of its successor chapters would be the Flesh Terrors, which just had individuals that followed a specific captain, I guess you could say, or chapter master, and broke off into its own set, but they still derive lineage from the Blood Angels. Little convoluted, little weird, but that's kind of how the whole principle works. This hopefully gives you a proper context on how everything blends together, such as what the hell Space Marines are, what's an Emperor, who's the Imperium, and why are there Primaris. All the big questions you're going to have stepping into a game that has just shy of 40 years of lore across multiple editions, rules, and publications. If you have any other questions, please feel free to ask in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what chapter you'll be playing come the launch of Space Marine 2. Also, if you want to find out more about a lot of the details in today's video, check out my playlist in the upper right corner where I go through the timeline of pre-Imperium humanity to help you really understand what's going on. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.